Hi, everybody. Today we are going to review Unit 6 and 7 to be ready for the exam. I'm going to be explaining the grammar topics very briefly, and then I'll be showing you some exercises you can do to practice these grammar structures. Okay, so first let's begin with the general contents of both units. In Unit 6, we took a look at how to state purpose. And to do that, we can use these phrases, which are to, for, and so that. We also saw how to express certainty and possibility using must, may, might, may, could, and can't. And then in Unit 7, we saw technically two different things, but let's divide it into three. We saw how to use used to, would, and simple past to talk about past events, and then also how to use comparative adverbs and comparative patterns. I decided to divide these two into, well, I decided to divide that topic into two different categories since they technically are different. So let's go with three. Okay, so to begin with, purpose. In English, we use several different words and phrases to express purpose. In other words, we say the reason why we do certain things, right? So there's a reason why we do certain actions, and with these structures, we can say what that reason is. We have four different ways we can express this, and the first one is to plus infinitive. For example, I'm going to the supermarket to buy some groceries. So this is the reason why I'm going to the supermarket. It's to buy some groceries. That's my reason. That's the why. Every time I use to, I have to use an infinitive, right? So to buy. Then we have for plus ing. Now, this is mostly to specify the function of an object. It's the most common use. Maybe you will see it used in other cases, but this is the most common. For example, this agenda is for keeping numbers and addresses. Oops, sorry, I made a mistake there. Let's see. It should be addresses. There we go. Okay, so numbers and addresses. So I'm stating the function of this particular object, which is the agenda, right? So it's for plus ing. We also have for plus a noun. Remember that a noun is every word that names an object, a place, a person even, right? All of those are nouns. So for example, let's stop here for some food and then we can go on. So the reason why I'm suggesting to stop there is for some food, right? This is the reason, to get some food. So instead of a verb, you can just use a noun if you want to, and then you can have a sentence like this. And finally, we have so that plus a clause. Remember that what we know as a clause is basically a subject and a verb. So in these type of sentences, you will always have two subjects and two verbs. One pair before so that, and then one pair before so that. Sorry, after so that. So we got up early. So this is the action that I did so that, and this is my reason, we wouldn't miss our bus. We got up early so that we wouldn't miss our bus. This is the reason why I got up early, so that we wouldn't miss our bus. So we have a subject and a verb right here. Okay, so those are the four uses of, not uses, those are the four forms in which we can state purpose in English. Okay, here we have a little exercise. These are 12 items. You can pause here to copy them or to write down your answers. I'll be giving the answers at the end of the video. So you can pause in here and then we can go on. Now, certainty and possibility. Now, please pay very close attention to this part. It caused some confusion when we were doing it in class. Let's see if we can clarify this once and for all. So we have, we use must, right? We use the modal verb must. When we think something is probable, when we say probable, it means that it has a very high probability, a very high chance of it being true. Usually because there is some kind of evidence, right? So her flight was at 4 in the morning. She must be very tired. Okay, so the reason why I am saying this sentence specifically with the modal verb must is because I have the evidence that was provided before. So if I know that a person had to take a flight or had to travel at 4 a.m. in the morning, the most obvious thing or the most reasonable thing is that that person is tired, right? So because I think that it's very likely or very probable, I say, well, she must be tired because of this, right? There's a reason why I'm saying it. Uh, the use of must is different from the use of may, might, and could. Um, the difference is that when we use any of these three, it's more like we're doing speculations or guessings, right? We think something is just possible, right? It has a 50-50 chance of it being true or not. For example, you can say, well, Paul might be able to help you, right? There's a chance that he will be able to help you. I don't know for sure. It could be that he says no, he may not be able to help you, or he might, right? So it's just like a 50-50 chance, but I think it's at least possible. That hotel may have a room available. Again, another possibility. There could be a problem with the trains. Again, another possibility, right? If you say a sentence with may, might, or could, the person who you're speaking to will understand that you're not sure about this, but it's what you think, it's what you believe. A really important point in here is that we can use might not and may not in like the negative forms, but we cannot use could not in this function. It doesn't really work the same way, so you shouldn't really use it in the negative form. And then we also have can't. This is when we think that something is basically impossible. And this usually happens in conversations with other people or when we have different pieces of evidence in the conversation. For example, imagine that you are going out with one of your friends and then your friend asks, is that Mike in the cafe? Like you think you see a person who looks like Mike, so you think it's that person. But you know that it can't be him. He's on vacation in Greece. So there's no way that that person is Mike. It's impossible because he's not in the city. Okay. And just like in here, we have like a very important point. Also here, we don't use the affirmative can in this case. It's only can't. Okay, only with can't. There we go. So those three uses are the most important ones you should learn. And then based on this, you can make different combinations, right? For example, like it says here, you can use the modal verb plus a base form to talk about certainty and possibility in the present. All of the previous examples are actually in, wait a second. All of the previous examples are actually in the present. So you can take a look at these. But also you can use the modal verb plus the verb be, just like that, just the verb to be, plus the ing if the action is in progress, right? It can be with must, with may, might, or could, or even with can't. Okay, you can put any of the modal verbs with the continuous form. And you can also talk about certainty and possibility in the past if you use the modal verb, the auxiliary verb have, and then a past participle verb. They share the exact same functions. The use doesn't change. You just change the form if you need to talk about the present, the past, or something that is in progress, right? So those are the three possibilities in terms of structure and tense. But the function, the use, never really changes. And there's also an exercise in here. In here, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to fill in the spaces with a modal verb and a verb that is suitable, right? that is most appropriate for each of these sentences and contexts. Again, I'll be showing the answers at the end of the video, so you can just pause in here, do the exercises, and check at the end. Okay, we're moving on to Unit 7. Now, with Unit 7, we saw 3 different structures to talk about the past. We have used to, would, and simple past. Okay, so let's begin with used to. Used to is basically a form that is used for talking about past habits and states. For example, we used to go on vacation to California every year when I was a child. This first sentence is a past habit. It's a past action, right? You physically go to a place, so it's a physical verb, an action verb. But they used to have a really tiny apartment some years ago. This is not an action. You don't, like, the verb have is not a physical action. It refers more to a state. Either you have it or you don't, right? It's not something that can be repeated like an action or a habit. It's just something that is the way it is or used to be the way it used to be. You can usually identify state sentences with verbs like have, feelings such as hate, love, like. The verb to be, used to be, is always going to be a state, especially if you're describing something or a situation. And then a past habit will always be a verb that involves some kind of motion, some kind of movement. The structure is, you have to be really careful with the structure. We use used to plus the base form in affirmative. We use didn't, used to. Notice how here the D disappears, obviously, because we have didn't. So didn't, used to plus the base form. And then when you want to put it in a question form, it's did plus the subject, used to. Again, the D disappears, and also the base form and the rest of the sentence, of course. We can use frequency adverbs and other time phrases. It's very recommended to do this because it gives more context to your sentence and it helps the other person or the other people understand your ideas better. For example, we used to eat there every week. That's another time phrase. Every week, every month, every year, every Tuesday, right? Those go at the end of the sentence to give more context. And if you want to use frequency adverbs, they always go before they used to. We always used to go to the beach in the summer when I was a child. Okay. We can also say sometimes, we can say never. Everything that every word that is a frequency adverb can be used in this position. We often used to go, right? But I do have to say something, and it's that although it is possible, like it is grammatically possible to use frequency adverbs with used to, it's better if you change the phrase to would. It just sounds a little bit better and a little bit natural, but this form is also correct. And talking about would, let's go on. So would is specifically used for repeated past actions, not states. So be really careful. If we take the sentences from the previous slide, they used to have a really tiny apartment and we used to go. Let's see here. Following this rule, we could change used to go for we would. We would go on vacation to California every year when I was a child, and that is correct. But we cannot say they would have a really tiny apartment some years ago. That is not correct because would is not for states, only for past actions and past habits. Okay, so past actions, but not states. I would spend every day in the summer outside when I was a child. That is correct because spend, like spend time doing something, is an action verb. Now structure. it's mostly only would plus the base form. We don't really use the negative forms or the question forms with this function. It's just not very common when we talk about the past. So you can just focus on this. And again, we often use frequency adverbs. This shouldn't be here. We often use frequency adverbs and other time phrases. Like, I would always do my homework at the last minute when I was in school. Now, the difference between frequency adverbs here and the previous structure is the place, right? The placement of the frequency adverb. So I would always, notice how it falls in the middle, just between would and the verb. Frequency adverbs always go in the middle in this structure. They always go between would and the other verb. Whereas if we think about the previous structure, always comes before used to, not in the middle, but before. It's common to use all of these structures when talking about the past. They aren't usually used in isolation. You can actually use different structures. Like when I first moved to Mexico City, that's past simple, I used to go out a lot, something that was very common of me, like a repeated action. I would visit museums and go to concerts. Again, I'm using would to talk about a past habit so that I don't repeat myself using used to a lot. Okay, so there are different types of combinations that you can make with used to, would, and the simple past. Okay, I have some more exercises here for you. It says, for each of the following sentences, choose either used to or would. If both are possible, use would. So this is going to be like we have been doing so far. We know that in theory, in all of the sentences where you use would, you can use used to as well. But not in all of the sentences where you use used to, you can use would. So we're going to follow the instructions. If you can only use used to, then you have to write that down. But if you are able to use both because it's a past habit or a past action, a past repeated action, then you can only use would. Or you can put both, right? You can put both to make it clearer for you. Okay, now we're moving on to comparative adverbs, which is also a topic from Unit 7. Now, with comparative adverbs, we have different structures, and we're going to see them one by one. The first and the easiest of them all is using more or less plus an adverb. For example, you can live more cheaply in other parts of the city. You clean the apartment less often than I do. Okay, so more cheaply and less often. Basically, what these are stating is a very exact translation. Puedes vivir de forma más económica en otras partes de la ciudad y tú limpias el apartamento con menos frecuencia de la que yo lo hago. So I'm just describing actions. I'm just describing verbs using more or less. Okay, it doesn't really get more complicated than that. Okay, something you have to be careful about is that some comparative adverb forms are irregular, so they don't really follow the more structure. For example, if you want to say well in a comparative form, you don't say more well, you say better. When it comes badly, you don't say more badly, you say worse. The same is true for far and farther, fast and faster, high and higher, early and earlier, late and later, and soon and sooner. Those are the most common ones, and I suggest you learn them. We also have comparative adverbs. I'm sorry, another form of comparative adverbs could be like these structures. So when you say as, adverb as, you're referring to things or situations that are similar or basically the same. Martina can run as fast as Sylvia. So they run at the same speed. They are similar or the exact same. The opposite is also true when we say not as plus adverb plus as. This means that things are different. They are not similar. For example, I can't cook as well as my mother. My mother cooks better than I do because I can't cook as well as she does. The not particle, it usually goes with the verb like we can see here. Okay, if it's possible, you have to conjugate your verb in the negative form so that this works. Then we move on to the comparative patterns, which is the other topic from the unit. So here, for example, okay, this is really, really important. The comparative patterns aren't just used because. They have a function, they have a reason why people use them, and that reason is the following: to say that a situation is changing. So when you use one of these patterns, you are trying to show, or you're trying to tell someone that the situation you are describing has been changing for some time. It's different in some kind of way. The way you usually describe this is saying comparative and comparative. If it's a short adjective or a short adverb, you can say it's getting colder and colder. You can just double the adjective or the adverb. It's getting colder and colder. It's probably going to snow. So what this means is that for a little bit of time now, gradually, little by little, the temperature has become colder. So it's getting colder and colder. Like every time gets even colder. So it's probably going to snow. That's the conclusion you can reach based on that. Or if you have a long adjective or adverb, you have to say things are becoming more and more expensive in this country. So if it's a short adjective or adverb, you can just double the word. If it's a long adjective or adverb, you have to say more and then the word. We can also say, I have so much work that I'm going to bed later and later. That's an adverb. Or we can also talk about things like more and more people. This is obviously not an adjective and not an adverb. It's just a noun, more and more people. That is also possible. More and more people go by bike to work these days, which means that the number of people doing it is increasing, is going up. Okay, so again, to say that a situation is changing, and you usually repeat the word colder and colder, more and more expensive, later and later, more and more people. So it has that very distinctive structure or very distinctive rule that you have to repeat the word. And then lastly, we have another comparative pattern, which is to say that two things, this is important, two things change at the same time. So with the previous structure, we only describe one situation, okay? We can describe, for example, the weather, the price of things, the time you go to bed, and the amount of people that do something. And you're only describing one situation. But when you use this structure, you are going to compare two different things, okay? And it's basically like, again, like not a double, it's a repeated comparative. Like the plus comparative plus clause, and then a comma, and again, the comparative plus clause. Let's look at some examples. The more you study, the more you learn. The older we grow, the wiser we become. The more carefully you plan, the better the result will be. The richer a person is, the more privilege they enjoy. The more I read, the less I remember. So here you can see a different number of combinations that you can make. The possibilities are limitless. You can make whatever sentence you want as long as you follow the correct structure. And then lastly, we have 10 translations to practice comparative patterns. And that's basically it. Okay, that's a very the quickest review I could make for 2 units. Now the answers to the exercises, I'll be sending them in a PDF file so that you can look at them when you finish answering them on your own. So please try to do the exercises, as many exercises as you can, check them out. I hope this helps you study for the exam, and I'll be seeing you soon. Bye, guys.